In this comparative study, I will be analyzing the role of characterization in the narrative arcs of two murder mystery thrillers. The two films I will be investigating are Se7en, a 1995 film directed by David Fincher, and Memories of Murder, a 2003 film directed by Bong Joon-ho. Despite their different cultural backgrounds, the films share the same genre. As murder mystery thrillers, they follow similar conventions and narrative arcs particular to their genre. Se7en follows two detectives, William Somerset and David Mills, as they hunt a serial killer whose murders are inspired by the 7 deadly sins, presumably taking place in a fictional North American city plagued by crime and urban decay. Memories of Murder follows detectives Park Do-man and So Tae-yoon as they investigate the serial murders of young women in a small Korean province, amidst the South Korean democratization movement of 1986. What's interesting about these films is how the characterization of both detective partners influence the narrative arcs of the films by inciting conflict and paralleling important plot points, and delivering social commentary specific to the cultural climate of the countries they hail from. Murder mystery films center around an unsolved mystery and the struggles faced by the characters in pursuit of the solution to the crime. These films follow a similar narrative structure. First, there must be a crime, and there must be a detective character who discovers clues and suspects. Se7en and Memories are excellent examples of how their characters' opposing personalities develop the main conflicts of both films through their characterization. Characterization is the sum of all observable qualities of a human being, everything knowable through careful scrutiny. Se7en isn't just a film about chasing a serial murderer, it's about two men deciding whether or not humanity is redeemable. Likewise, Memories is about how people change under traumatic circumstances.
너 많이 변했다.
These emotional throughlines are expressed through the character's perception of the situation at hand, making the narrative arcs of the films an illustration of their characterization. The character arcs mirror that of the narrative arcs, following 3 distinct chapters: the characters' initial belief systems, their conflict, and their ultimately changed worldviews. Both films center around contrasting personalities which pit the detectives against each other from the start, inciting conflict as they are forced to work together. Where Somerset is a patient, veteran detective, Mills is an immature amateur, a small man in a big suit. Somerset's extensive experience in solving crime has dissolved all hope he once had for mankind's salvation, the reason he wishes to retire. Mills, his replacement, is young, full of ambition, and adamant that humanity is innately good and therefore worth fighting for. Do-man is an old-school local detective used to running things his own way, whose authority is threatened with the arrival of Tae-yoon, a professional from Seoul educated in deductive investigation. Where Do-man turns to corrupting procedure to confirm his own assumptions, Tae-yoon's methodology is characterized by drawing conclusions from empirical evidence.
자세히부터 봐도 알 수 있죠. 설은 절대 거짓말 안 하거든. 설은 절대 거짓말 안 하거든요.
또 시작이야.
Both films display the opposition between the partners visually, isolating them from each other either in separate shots or through composition. Their differences are further demonstrated through mise-en-scène. Where Somerset is in a library studying classic literature and taking notes, Mills sits at his living room coffee table with a can of beer, hopelessly staring at crime photos as the TV plays in the background. Where Tae-yoon studies documents and files, Do-man sticks photos of suspects in his notebook, under the belief that if he looks at them long enough, he'll be able to identify the culprit.
얘들 얼굴을 딱 보다 보면은 어느 순간 감이 딱 와. 직감적으로.
The clash between scientific investigation versus an intuition-based one is a recurring clash in the movie. As both detectives take matters into their own hands, it only drives a deeper wedge between them, and as their relationships experience setbacks, so do their investigations. Somerset's wisdom from years of experience on the job are often disregarded by naive Mills, who doesn't appreciate the value of understanding the killer's mindset. Somerset's attempts to get inside the killer's head by empathizing with his cynical worldview are quickly thwarted by Mills' desire to label him crazy.
Why do we gotta sit here, rotting, waiting until the lunatic does it again?
It's dismissive to call him a lunatic. Don't make that mistake.
Come on, he's insane. Look, right now he's probably dancing around in his grandma's panties. Yeah, rubbing himself in peanut butter. Ooh, how's that?
A nutcase rather than an equal representation of mankind.
This guy's methodical, exacting, and worst of all, patient.
He's a nutbag.
This opens a debate as to whether or not the killer's intentions are worth acknowledging. What sets John Doe apart from other murderers is his big picture.
He's preaching.
punish.
Sermons were about atonement for sin. These murders are like forced attrition.
Forced what?
Attrition. It's when you regret your sins, but not because you love God.
Se7en proposes that depravity is perpetuated by sociocultural environments, a topic the characters explore by means of discussions critiquing the negative state of America's big cities.
How can I bring a child into a world like this? How can a person grow up with all this around them? I just don't think I can continue to live in a place that embraces and nurtures apathy as if it was a virtue.
On the other hand, Two-Man and Tae-yoon's egos and stubbornness hinder their progress. Two-Man continues to coerce confessions and forge evidence, at one point even killing an important witness in the case. Tae-yoon's interference with Two-Man's investigative approach leads to multiple heated confrontations between the two, where at one point they realize that whilst they were arguing, they let the killer strike again right under their noses.
너희 둘이 정신없이 싸우고 있을 때 그때 당했구만. 그죠?
The portrayal of the police force's corruption and incompetency is a direct criticism of South Korea's political regime at the time. This commentary on prolific corruption extends outside of the justice system, criticizing the dictatorship suppression of the democratization movement. Memories' depiction of character was used to support the Korean people and voice their concerns regarding governance and freedom, with Two-Man and Tae-yoon acting as metaphorical vehicles for conflicting political methodologies. These conflicts set the stage for emotionally engaging stories where the characters need to learn from each other. As the characters reconcile after confrontation, they find themselves on the same page. They realize that they're on the same team and they must set aside their differences in order to solve the case. Subsequent frames show the characters facing the same way, as if to say they're both heading in the same direction. That being said, the case can only be resolved once the characters are fully developed, meaning that they must experience a shift in perception. Personality conflicts pave the way for important realizations to take place between the characters. At Se7en's climax, Mills is faced with the devastating news that his wife and unborn child have been murdered by John Doe. The hope that Mills originally had for the triumph of good over evil has been vanquished, as he ultimately gives in to the villain's wishes. In turn, Somerset's attitude shifts as well.
Ernest Hemingway once wrote, "The world is a fine place and worth fighting for." I agree with the second part.
With the case and the character conflicts having reached their resolution, the sense of finality is coupled with that of doom. Somerset's newfound determination to fight for humanity is not inspired by hope, but by fear. In choosing to let John Doe win, Se7en warns us of the consequences that follow their refusal to combat degeneracy. In Memories, the characters experience a similar shift. By the end of the film, Two-Man and Tae-yoon are no longer stuck in their principles. Two-Man throws away his notebook, claiming that Tae-yoon's scientific approach was right all along. Tae-yoon, however, now acts on his own volitions, making broad assumptions based off of gut feelings rather than concrete evidence. In the face of paperwork proving a man innocent, Tae-yoon disregards fact in favor of the assumption he has already formed, that man is guilty. Two-Man, who once claimed to be able to make a verdict simply through eye contact, is dumbfounded when he cannot reach a conclusion. The detectives let the man go, breaking down and giving up. These character arcs confirm the worst. Corruption is inevitable under traumatic circumstances. Memories' bleak ending serves as a cultural commentary. If civil unrest in South Korea continues, overcoming institutional corruption will be virtually impossible. Only once the demands of the citizens have been met and the people are given a voice can honesty and morality ensue. What idea is expressed in virtually all detective fiction? Crime doesn't pay. The interlock of characterization and narrative arcs is particularly evident in the murder mystery genre, whose stories are built on characters driven to prove that justice will always be served. Without the development of these characters, their motivations, relationships, and beliefs, there is little to be said about the significance of their success or failure. Se7en and Memories of Murder paint a chilling image of characters whose growth ended in defeat, and whose search for meaning was met with devastating results. Nevertheless, these stories provide insight into the dynamic nature of humanity and the grim outcomes of murder and evil through their well-developed characters.